This is what I call the perfect first layer test. Hoo-wee. That's nice. This is just as good as the Bambu Lab printers at this point. Anyone who's been following the world of 3D printing lately will surely know what these three machines are. We've got the Creality K1 over here, the Bambu Lab P1S, and the Creality K1 Max over on this side. These are the top printers in the $500 to $100 price range. And if you've followed my journey with these Creality K1s, you'll know that I had a lot of issues with the extruder on this original unit. Well, I've got good news for any K1 owners with issues, because we got a solution. It shouldn't be surprising to anyone that Creality was rushing this K1 out to market. I mean, they've been losing a lot of market share to the Bambu Lab P1P and P1S, so they really had to get something out there in order to compete, and they delivered with this K1. However, the extruder on that thing was a little half-baked. I don't think it was quite ready for prime time, and I was having under-extrusion and reliability issues with my copy of the machine. By the time they came out with the K1 Max, they had fixed their extruder design and were shipping different units on there that were a lot more reliable. This is a new extruder and Hotend that Creality sent out in order to address issues that people had with initial quality for their machines. They made two large changes to the extruder, and I'll go over them now. Here's an older copy of the extruder. You can see it's made out of a polished and chromed metal part. And here's the newer one. It's got more of a matte finish, and the material choice is a little bit different here, as well as the design. So you can see they've removed some of these lightning holes, so it's actually connected in this area. Instead of here, it's just like a large continuous slot on the top and bottom. But in terms of the overall geometry, they're very similar. The main difference here is the material choice. Obviously this one's shiny and this one isn't, so there's something going on there. But if you take a magnetic tool and you touch it to this new extruder, you can see it sticks. If you take a magnetic tool to the old extruder, it doesn't stick at all. There's no steel or ferromagnetic pieces on this extruder arm assembly. On this one, I believe they were using an aluminum alloy, and on the newer one, they're using a steel alloy. This older one has marks that are characteristic of some kind of die casting process. So this is made using a process that's very similar to how they make Hot Wheels toy cars. And this one, you can see the machining marks left on it, right in there. So this one was CNC machined out of a single piece of steel. This matte finish is probably some kind of bead blasting or sand blasting that they did to just kind of clean up the parts after the fact. But the major difference here is that this new part is made out of a much stronger alloy, and it's going to hold up better and be stiffer. So that's what they really needed to do here, is step up their design practices and make a stronger part that's going to be more reliable, and Creality have finally delivered. So let's get it installed on our Creality K1 here. Fortunately, we can take off this little hacky mod that I put on here. I put an aftermarket extruder on here, but I no longer think that that's necessary or recommended, unless you just want the style points of going with your extruder of choice. With this new fixed extruder, that should fix most of the problems. Also, they've included this little fiberglass shim. This is just made out of a material that's very similar to what they make PCBs out of. It's 0.5 millimeters thick, and I believe the purpose of this is to insulate the extruder and its gears from the stepper motor that drives the extruder. And I think the reason for adding this insulating spacer is to prevent the extruder from getting too hot, because when these extruder gears heat up, they end up kind of softening the plastic of the filament that it's trying to drive. So you're reducing the tensile strength of the filament, which means you can't push on it as hard before it breaks or yields. So this should further help address any under extrusion problems that this extruder was having. Additionally, they sent out a new Hotend module. I'll take a look at it really quick here, and we'll probably install it on this machine while we're at it. It looks like a bimetallic heat break, and they're using a red silicone sock, probably to help differentiate it from the older units, which may or may not have been defective. It's really difficult to remove these silicone socks on this particular Hotend, but we'll get it off so that we can take a look at what's going on in here. Okay, wow, this looks interesting. I'm not sure if this is the same design they were using before, but it looks like we've got a thermistor that looks like it's rated up to 320 degrees Celsius, and that's screwed in or press fit into this little brass piece on the bottom. And then we've got our ceramic heater here, and you can see the little heating traces running back and forth throughout this cylindrical part. So pretty nice little Hotend. We'll get that installed as well. Alright, so let's start off this modding session by taking off the old Hotend. I haven't had any problems with this hot end, but other people have had reports of it breaking off mid-print, so that's not very good. So just as a little bit of preventative maintenance, let's just take this apart and put the new one on there. So here's the new hot end. It looks like it has a copper segment up at the top. On the old hot end, it's just got a regular steel portion at the top. And this might be a single piece hot end where it's all machined out of like a single piece of steel, versus this one is made out of multiple pieces that are press fit together. They're both using what appears to be the same ceramic heater, but on the new hot end you can see this little thermistor is much larger and it's press fit into this little brass piece, versus on the old hot end it looks like they're using a smaller thermistor that's just kind of shoved in there. This looks a lot more robust and sturdy, and it's also using the bimetallic heat break design, so good little upgrades there. You can see on the old hot end I'm using a bimetallic CHT nozzle, which is a great high performance nozzle. This one currently has the old nozzle in it, so I guess I'll unscrew that and put this bimetallic CHT nozzle in there, just so I get that added performance and the ability to run abrasive materials. So let's remove this here CHT nozzle. Oh, what? That's loose? That's, interesting stuff. And then we'll loosen up this one as well. This is a handy little torque wrench that I have from Slice Engineering. It automatically applies 1.5 Newton meters. So I know a lot of people who are installing these CHT nozzles and they accidentally break the nozzle, or even standard nozzles, they'll damage them somehow. Having this automatically torque limit itself to 1.5 Newton meters is really handy. So I'll leave a link in the description to where you can pick one of these up. Also, you can see there's some remnants of my boron nitride paste there. I know it's kind of a tradition to apply way too much boron nitride paste to these things, but come on, I think it's been overdone a little bit. So let's move on with the build. By the way, I'm totally just kidding about the boron nitride comment. I mean, we always gotta apply boron nitride paste. So that's why I've bought this 1 kilogram bag of boron nitride powder, so that I can apply as much as I want to every application that I need. And no, I'm not kidding, this is actually 1 kilogram of boron nitride powder. So everybody subscribe so you can see more boron nitride content in the future. Alright, so now I'm gonna mix all this stuff together so I can get myself a nice big batch of boron nitride paste. And I'm doing this outside because I'm not stupid, I'm just crazy. I don't want all this powder getting loose in my office, that'd be kind of a nightmare. Alright, so I've got what appears to be about 1/10 of a gallon of water. And I'll just, maybe I'll pour some of that out. I don't quite need that much. Alright, so now I've got my jug of boron nitride paste. If all of that seems like a bit too much work for you, you can just buy it from Slice Engineering. I'll leave a link in the description to that as well. For any of the nozzles that I've installed using that boron nitride paste and that little wrench, I haven't had any issues with nozzles coming loose, so I don't know if that means it's doing something. For me, it provides that extra little bit of security, and it also improves heat transfer, so it's just a great product to apply to your 3D printer hot end. So I'm just going to go back and, oh, wow, that's coming loose in all sorts of weird ways. I'm not entirely sure how this Creality hot end works, but it looks like I'm able to loosen it. It's almost like that central heater core is tightened in between this top and bottom segment. So you just kind of, you can apply some torque like this to this top and bottom flange, and that seems to tighten down onto the heater core. I'm really not sure how this thing's supposed to work. Then we'll apply some of that boron nitride paste. There's enough just on the top of this jug to get some on the threads there. And then I'll tighten this back together. And we'll use the torque wrench again. So first I'm going to tighten it relative to this brass piece at the bottom. That's installed nice and tight, and then we'll plug both of the wires in. This is not fun. Oh man. See, if I designed this breakout board, there's no way I would make it this hard to plug things into it. This is just silly. I want to break this thing. Ah, there we go. Good old Nipex tools to the rescue. I have no idea how this is supposed to work, but I guess in theory, if you have compression between the nozzle and the heat break, that's all you need to prevent this thing from coming loose and leaking. So we'll see how that works. Let me just clean this up a little bit, and we'll move on to the extruder. But just out of curiosity, while we've got all the parts here, I kind of want to take this hot end apart, so let's just unscrew this black piece. So you can see this ceramic heater core is actually floating. We can move it up and down. So yeah, I mean, this is a complex design. I don't care to know the intricacies of how it works. I'm just going to use it, and hopefully it all holds together just fine. Now previously, I replaced the whole extruder on this machine with an aftermarket extruder. In this case, I installed a Bondtech LGX Lite. Very reliable, so that's exactly what you want in an extruder. As far as I was concerned, the stock extruder that came on this machine was just not delivering in terms of performance or reliability, so it had to be replaced. Now it looks like they've got things sorted out, so we're going to give it another shot. We're going to try out the Creality extruder. Now this orange part is an aftermarket adapter that I designed, but it looks like we don't need it anymore, so we're just going to take it off. The downside of this setup that I've installed is that it really throws off the center of mass of this tool head, which probably messes up the print performance. I had a lot of artifacts when I was printing with this thing, so it wasn't the best in terms of print quality, but it got me the reliability that I was after, and I feel like reliability is more important than print quality, for me at least. Hopefully with this new extruder design, we're going to be restoring the center of gravity while also getting reliable extrusion. So here's the old module that I designed. It's pretty slick, it all fits together really nicely, but it's time to go back to the original design. Alright, so I actually had to go home and find this stepper motor. It was in a box of knickknacks because I thought I'd never need it again. But that's why I'm a hoarder and I keep things around like this just in case I need them. So let's get this assembled. You just need to put this little spacer on. I think I want the motor wires coming out down to the bottom right so that it's closer to the place where it needs to be plugged in. And then I'll install these two screws and one right here. And the best thing about this new extruder is how assuredly it stays in its locked or unlocked position. It takes a little bit more force to move it, but when you lock it, it's going to stay locked, which is, you know, pretty important for an extruder. You don't want it coming half loose in the middle of a print and then having all your parts be under extruded. This is definitely a lot more assured in its setting, which is exactly what they needed to do. I'm glad they finally fixed it. Now this is like their 4th or 5th revision of this extruder design. They actually sent me a quote-unquote new extruder even earlier, but it was made out of the same aluminum material and I did not believe that it would hold up over time. Now that they've changed to a steel alloy, which is probably being produced at a much more significant cost, I mean they're machining this out of a single block of steel as far as I can tell, this should be a lot more high quality and should last a little bit longer than those older designs. So let's get this installed right here. I'm just gonna plug the wire in down here. If you've got a hot glue gun, that'll probably do the trick. I've got some silicone adhesive that I'm just gonna apply. I don't know if that's gonna do anything, but better safe than sorry here. I don't want stuff coming unplugged in the middle of printing. While I'm getting started with this print, I'm going to go over the few remaining pain points on this printer. One is this filament runout detector sensor on the back. It's a pretty cheap design, and I'll often have problems feeding the filament through, and it'll take like 30 seconds of messing around just to load a spool of filament, which might not seem like that big of a deal, but on a machine that's this expensive, with competition as harsh as it is right now, with the Bambu Lab printers offering, you know, a really good filament changeover, I think that Creality needs to put a little more work into this filament runout detection sensor just to make it easier to use. Also, I always have issues with the cable chain kind of bunching up on the right side here, especially when I have the enclosure installed. It's always kind of rubbing against stuff. I mean, this isn't a stock setup because I've moved the anchoring position over, so it's not the best example. But again, the cable management could be improved on these machines. Then I think this has been addressed in other versions of the printer, but this Bowden tube kind of management system needs improvement. In the early versions, they fed the Bowden tube inside of this cable chain, which wasn't a good idea, and I think they've fixed it on future versions. You can see on the K1 Max, it's got those little clips there, holding on to it, and tying that to the Bowden tube. I was having all sorts of jamming issues. It got working eventually, but I remembered that there's a little piece of Bowden tube in there that I forgot to reinstall. So I'm going to have to take this apart and put that piece of Bowden tube back in there, because without it, there's like an unguided portion of the filament path, and it can bow out to the side and cause all sorts of issues. Since I took this apart a while ago, I'm not sure if I have that little segment anymore, so I'm going to have to cut a new piece out. And after I apply glue stick, I like to take a wet paper towel and just kind of reconstitute everything and get it in a super even layer. It almost looks like it's been applied by a paintbrush when I'm done with it here. But again, I can get like super thin layers if that's what I want to go for. And I'll hold on to this paper towel because it's got a lot of good glue left on it. Alright, now it's time to check the perfection of this first layer. Speaking of perfect first layers, I have a podcast that I film every other week where we talk about 3D printer stuff. So check the description for the link to that podcast. This is what I call the perfect first layer test, and we're just putting a first layer down across the entire build volume and seeing what kind of performance we get. And as you can see, we've got really good performance here. Let's just get a nice close-up of this. Very nice, consistent first layer. Now let's peel it off and hold the first layer in our hands. You're not going to have any bed adhesion issues with this kind of first layer. I mean, I'm having trouble just peeling it off here. Alright, I'm just going to use this knife here. We'll get it under this edge and peel this first layer off, and look at that first layer quality. Hoo-wee. That's nice. That's as good as it gets. There's no over extrusion, no under extrusion, just a perfect first layer there. They're not separating at all. This is even better than what I was getting on my K1 Max, and this is finally on par with the P1P and P1S and X1C performance. This is just as good as the Bambu Lab printers at this point, so really good on Creality for figuring out how to get their extruder working. Sure, it should have been working at product launch, but at least they've figured it out now, and these results are just fantastic. Testing, yep. Alright, so that was a pretty fun video. I installed these upgrades onto the printer, and you know, it turned out pretty good. Now if you already have a K1 and you're stuck with the older Extruder or Hotend design, and you wanted to upgrade it, don't worry, Creality's got you covered. If you head over to some of the links in the description, I've linked to some articles on how you can get those upgrades on your Creality printer. Creality's doing this like thanks to our supporters event thing, where they're selling you like a super discounted Extruder and Hotend upgrade for like $2 or $3. It's really, you know, not that much money. But really, these are parts that they should be upgrading and like covering under warranty, because the original parts that they sent out, in my opinion, weren't any good. So at least they're coming out and providing these parts for you. It would have been better if they just sent them out for free, but $2 or $3 isn't really expensive enough to make a difference in whether you should buy it or not. I think you should definitely get those, so check the links in the description and get signed up for the newsletter to figure out how you can order those parts, because it's a clear upgrade in my opinion. Also included in that upgrade pack is an AI camera, so basically it's just a webcam that you can install into the top left corner of this machine, and that'll let you monitor your prints remotely and do time lapses and all that kind of stuff. For $1, it's worth it. And I think they're also throwing in a spool of filament. So it's definitely worth getting over there and signing up for those free upgrade packs. I think it's Creality's way of kind of saying sorry for shipping this in a half-baked configuration. But, you know, these new upgrades put it much closer to being in line with what the Bambu Lab printers are offering. That's perfect first layer quality and the print monitoring capabilities of having a camera and just having a more consistent, more reliable design. And I'm glad that Creality is continuing to work on and improve this machine. Really, it's just the progression of technology, and fortunately Creality is providing those upgrades to their early adopters. When it comes to which printer you should get in the $500 to $1,000 price range, these are basically your best options here. You've got the Creality K1 with its new extruder. It's producing awesome first layers, and hopefully it'll be a reliable machine. I haven't done the long-term testing on it yet. You've got the K1 Max, which is $850 right now. I'm not sure what the order status is on those, if they've sold out or whatever. But the current deal where it's $50 off the pre-sale price, $850, that's a really good deal on a really big machine. At the full retail price of $1,000, I think it still might be worth it, but you know, that's less of a good deal than $850. When it comes to the Bambu Lab competition, you've got the P1P, the P1S, and the P1S plus AMS upgrade kit. That's a mouthful. But basically, you're never going to want to buy the P1P plus the AMS because those two added together cost $950. And the combination kit, when you get the AMS and the P1S together, is also $950. So if you're planning on buying those two things, you might as well just get the P1S for the same price. Also, the P1S with its full enclosure will allow you to print ABS and polycarbonate, which are genuinely useful materials because it allows you to print stuff that will survive better in an outdoor environment. You can print ABS on all of these machines. It's just I would shy away from getting a P1P because you're just going to be able to print PLA and PETG and carbon fiber reinforced nylon if you put some upgrades into it. And you basically have to enclose it to unlock all the material capabilities. Versus with this P1S, it's only $100 extra and you get like much better material capabilities due to that full enclosure. There's a number of other benefits to the full enclosure, like it looks better, and if you have pets or kids, they're not going to get caught in there. So it's just a solid upgrade. I wouldn't really consider getting the P1P. Just go straight for the P1S. And if you're still wanting to stay in the Bambu Lab ecosystem and you don't like this crappy little screen, well then you've got to upgrade to the $1,200 X1C, and then there's the X1C plus AMS combo, which is like $1,450 or something ridiculous. This stuff gets really expensive in the Bambu Lab arena. If you just want single material printing where you're not doing multi-material or multiple spools changing over automatically, then what you get with the K1 and the K1 Max are a lot more features for a lower price. I also want to give a quick update on what these machines need to improve on at this point. The K1 and the K1 Max have some significant improvements over what was initially released on the K1. Improvements to the hardware like the extruder and Hotend, and improvements to the software. However, there is a little bit of an annoyance about that, which I'll talk about in a second here. With the Bambu Lab machines, they're still shipping the same hardware. They're still using the same frame, the same Hotend, the same everything basically, because they kind of knocked it out of the park with their initial design, and they're just continuing to sell that. One thing that I'd really like to see Bambu Lab work on is improving this user interface. This cheapo user interface is just not very good. I mean, sure, it's fine. I mean, it gets the job done, but having a touchscreen interface like what you have on the K1 printers and on the X1C is much preferred because you can display much more information, and it's just a lot faster to start up print jobs and browse through options, and you don't have to use your phone to do certain capabilities of the machine. So if Bambu Lab can come up with a touchscreen upgrade for this machine and offer that at like the $800 price point, I think that would be a really good deal. I would gladly pay $100 more for that improved user interface. However, they're forcing you to go all the way up to the X1C, which is like $500 more just to get that touchscreen. I don't think it's worth it. And it just kind of calls into question why they're creating this false dichotomy of like, oh, you have to have a really crappy interface or you have to buy the really expensive machine and get the really nice interface. So yeah, it's part of their deal and how they're trying to make money and get you to upsell into the more expensive model. But you know, that's the game you have to play if you're getting a Bambu Lab printer. On the Creality printers, you're getting all of the features, even on the lower end, less expensive machine. However, it is a little bit smaller and it's not quite as polished as the Bambu Lab designs. On both of these printers, there's some stuff that they can work on, including the cable management. The way the cable kind of pops off to the side here, it just seems a little bit cheap. Likewise, on the K1 Max, you also have the cable management not being the best. So if you decide to use this far right side of the, well, I guess it's your left. If you choose to use this side, like all the way up against the wall, then you'll have some weird stuff where that cable chain is kind of bumping into the side here. And it just kind of feels cheap and sounds low quality when you've got that cable chain rattling around. So they need to improve their cable management a little bit. Also, they need to improve their slicer tuning and work on getting that open source version of the code out there. They're using Clipper, for those of you who don't know, and they're currently in violation of the license for Clipper. They need to be releasing the source code for that, and I think it'll be good for everyone involved, because us users will benefit because we'll get some community firmware on there, we'll get like all the capabilities of Clipper, which will really help unlock a lot of stuff on these machines. Also, I've heard that the Voron team is really excited about the bed leveling technology that they're using those 3 load cells. And Creality must have created a Clipper implementation of that load cell leveling system. I mean, that's what they're using to get this awesome first layer result. Contributing that back to the Clipper community, I think, would be awesome, and it would help the Voron team improve their designs and really kind of give back to the community of software that everyone's helping to develop. In terms of open source, Bambu Lab hasn't really made too much comments about what they're going to open source on their firmware and their software. Surely they've benefited from a lot of the advancements that Clipper has contributed to 3D printer firmware, and they're basically standing on the shoulders of giants there a little bit. Testing, please. Okay. So it would be nice to give back a little bit, but we're not entitled to their IP. If they want to keep it private, then that's their prerogative. Let's see. Other things that Creality could improve on this machine. I mean, there's the cable chain, the slicer, and tuning. But other than that, this is an incredibly solid machine. I haven't tested it out on the higher temperature materials yet, and I would like to. I'm planning on getting around to that soon. But just knowing that this extruder has kind of been sorted out allows me to do a big sigh of relief, because that was the one thing that I was really worried about with these machines, is these extruders on the early units not being very good. But they finally figured it out, and they're shipping out good extruders now. On the K1 Max, however, it's got a little bit more stuff that they need to figure out. Now, we finally got perfect first layers on this K1, but on my K1 Max, there's a little bit of inconsistency in these first layers. It's got under extrusion artifacts here and over extrusion artifacts down here. So, you know, they've got some work to do on this one. I'm not sure what the issue is, because I think the extruder's fine. Now it's just the actual bed leveling, or maybe the rigidity of this whole setup, or it could be that cable chain kind of bumping into things and throwing things out of alignment during printing. Clearly there's something that needs to be improved there. Jumping back to the K1 and K1 Max potentially, I tried to do a USB offline firmware update on these machines, and it didn't work. So it was just throwing me an error. That means I'm going to have to log on to some kind of Wi-Fi network with internet access to be able to download the latest version of firmware and do over-the-air updates. Creality is claiming that you can update this offline using USB, which is a feature I really like and appreciate. However, I wasn't able to get it to work on my machine, so there's something there that they still need to do some work on. Oh yeah, and one last thing I guess that I would put on my wish list for Creality to come up with is some kind of AMS system like this. I mean, we've got the Bambu Lab AMS system. AnchorMake is coming out with a V6 AMS type system, which has 6 spools that are heated and will allow you to change materials just like the Bambu Lab AMS. So that'll be cool to see that come out. But what we really need to see from Creality is their own AMS system. Or, you know, if they open source the firmware, someone might figure out how to hack this thing and get the Bambu Lab AMS system running on the K1. That's the advantage of open sourcing things, is the community can just go hog wild and hack all sorts of stuff together and make your products more useful and more competitive. So that about wraps up what I wanted to talk about today. Make sure to get this extruder upgrade, because Creality is offering to send these out to customers basically free of charge. I mean, $1 or $2 is doesn't really cover the cost of this extruder because they're machining these out of a solid piece of steel and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely go over there, get signed up for the newsletter so you make sure you get those upgrades. Also, click all of the affiliate links in the video description. That really helps me out. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.